Hey everyone, it's Michelle from Michelle Farrell Coaching and from Straight Up Strong, and today I would like to show you my 5 favorite tips for improving the effectiveness of our single leg deadlifts. Now, you may or may not know, single leg or unilateral leg exercises are very useful for us to incorporate into our training. 1, it helps us to work on muscle imbalances that we all have in our bodies. We all have a side that's a little stronger. We all have a side that's a little tighter, right? So by working in unilateral or single side movement patterns, we're able to kind of target and address those in a way that we're not able to when we're using bilateral movement patterns, okay? Also, if we think about it, we don't often move through the world with our feet right next to each other like we do when we're doing a traditional squat or deadlift. So working in a single leg is also impacting our bodies in a functional sort of way, especially for walking and for running. Another great reason to work on single leg movements is because, especially if you're working at home, you might need an extra level of challenge, right? You may have outgrown the amount of weights that you have at home, and working single leg is going to be able to target that strength in a different way without necessarily having to add more weight. So let's get into this. A lot of times when I'm working with Straight Up Strong members and my one-on-one clients, when we're doing single leg deadlifts, I notice that many folks typically have a hard time staying stable and or kind of open up to the side like this, where it's not necessarily wrong, but if you are using a weight that is really challenging, you might be putting extra strain on your joints that just isn't necessary, okay? So one of the biggest things for increasing the effectiveness of our single leg deadlift, which by the way, is going to work on stability and balance in a way that a two-legged deadlift is not going to work on. So when we are doing a full-on single leg deadlift, we're also working on balance and stability in addition to strength, okay? So keep that in mind that when you're doing the single leg deadlift, you're likely gonna have to drop the weight that you would think that you would use for this movement while you're also working on that stability. So I oftentimes recommend that folks work on this movement with no weight. So leave your ego at the door, drop the weight, and at least do a warm-up set without any weights. When we are doing our single leg hinge, we are still, just like in a two-legged hinge, we're thinking about breaking at our hips. Tailbone is coming back towards the wall behind us like we're gonna shut a car door with our butt, right? Hinging over, long spine, shoulders back and down, bending our knees as we need to come into that full hinge. Our butt's not coming above our head. We're trying to not round our upper back, right? Nice and strong here. We want those same basic principles when we are doing this on one leg. So, breaking at the hips, strong back and shoulders, hinging over. Notice my shoulders and my hips are still facing the floor. My back leg is simply floating up behind me, and you'll notice a little wobble I have here as I'm addressing my balance. Pushing the floor away, coming back to standing. Hinge, shoulders back, strong back, long spine. Push the floor away to come back to standing. So, as you're doing this, if you're noticing, and I've been practicing these all morning, I just actually did a yoga session, so I'm not even as wobbly as I normally am my first set with these. What you can do is add a prop to help you out. A bench, a chair, a table, a wall, anything you need here. As you start hinging over, hinge. Now I have that little bit of sensory input here, letting my body know I'm safe. I'm still using my leg to help get me back up to top. I'm barely touching this bench to help me come back up to standing. Depending on how strong you are and where you are in your practice with these, you might actually push off that bench a little bit to help you come to standing. Eventually, you want to minimize how much you use that, and that's a way to measure your progress, right? So, bench, chair, wall, perfectly acceptable for you to use, especially during your warm-up sets. Drop the weight, drop your ego, okay? So I know the title of this was 5 tips. So the first tip is to drop your weight. Leave your ego at the door, practice these body weight. Second tip is to add in the addition of a support prop, a wall, a bench, a chair, whatever you need to help you practice this movement. Third tip is to, instead of having your leg come all the way up, we're going to kickstand that non-working leg behind us. I'm just bringing my foot so that my toes are in line with my heel, but I'm still standing like at hip width, like train tracks, not a tightrope, okay? This is going to increase our stability, just like riding a bike. When you park your bike, you put your kickstand down so your bike doesn't fall over, right? So we're thinking about pretty much 80% of our weight is in our front leg, about 20% in our back leg, still following those principles of hinging and push the floor away. This kickstand or B stance option is also really good when you want to use heavier weight and you don't want to focus so much on balance and stability. You can add more weight to this movement because you're not as wobbly here, right? So sometimes it's really nice when you pick a new weight to use, you start with the kickstand option and then stick with the same weight and start practicing with that leg floating up, right? So first tip, drop the weight, leave your ego at the door. Second tip, use a prop to support your balance. Third tip is to try using a B stance or kickstand stance as you're practicing. Fourth tip, really focus on the same movement pattern as you would if you had your feet parallel together. So again, thinking about that break at the hips, shoulders are back and down, strong lats, strong core, hinging over, bringing that tailbone back, press the floor away to come to standing. Those same principles are going to be used in the single leg. Fifth tip, be kind and compassionate with yourself. If you are very, very wobbly during this movement, take a deep breath. We all start somewhere. We are all in a different place. Hopefully, if you try the first 3 tips and always keep the 4th tip of good form in the back of your mind, you are going to feel stronger and more stable in your deadlifts the more you practice. So I hope this was helpful for you. Be sure to follow us here on YouTube. Also be sure to visit our website, straightupstrong.com. Visit my website, michellefarrellcoaching.com, and I hope to connect with you in the future.